Christopher Smith, Persuasive Speech, Communications 110, Speech. This is my audience. So this is a discussion on maintaining a stable power grid. In January 2014, due to some weather issues with the extreme cold, due to some other issues with maintaining wind energy online and natural gas constraints, power prices peaked at $2,000 a megawatt hour on the 15-minute exchange. Put that in perspective, normally that goes about $50 per megawatt hour, so that was a huge jump for that period of time. Day ahead prices were at $300 a megawatt hour. And the reason why we need to have a stable power grid and a diverse portfolio of energy sources is to make sure that we maintain our stability. There's three things really you need to think about when maintaining a stable, diverse power portfolio. One, with recent changes in the environment, environmental concerns have become a big part of it. Cost, because frankly we don't want to pay too much for power. And then there's stability. Just trying to where I was going. So, like I said, over the last decade, environmental concerns have become a much bigger concern. If you read up on the EPA, currently coal is our biggest producer of energy for electricity. We use 91% of all the coal we use is converted into electricity. If you read on the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, coal is responsible for 25% of our greenhouse gas emissions here in the U.S. and 44% of our overall CO2 in the world is coming from coal burning for use in power production. So that's why we've been pushing more towards wind, solar. We've always had hydro. They always have some minor environmental effects, but compared to coal and the impact on the environment, that's much smaller. The other big source of energy we use here in the U.S. is nuclear power. Roughly 19%, according to the EPA, is not the correction. The Energy Information Agency is 19% is nuclear power. There's obviously environmental concerns there. Primarily, if you look at Chernobyl, Fukushima, and 3 Mile Island. Those are obviously big things that people are concerned about, but when you look back at the history and you compare deaths from different areas, coal, or actually fossil fuels, environment, or the renewables, the wind and solar, and the nuclear is actually very low in causing deaths compared to the other ones per kilowatt hour. One of the biggest drawbacks for renewable energy, though, is cost. Put out by the Forbes article, Naked Cost of Energy. Right now, 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour for solar. You pay 4.3 cents per kilowatt hour for wind. Coal is 4.1 cents per kilowatt hour. Natural gas, due to hydraulic fracking, has dropped to about 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and nuclear is 3.2 cents per kilowatt hour. Nuclear has a very low cost per megawatt hour. It's a very good, stable thing. Some of the things that drive up the cost of the renewables is all the development that's still going into them, and there's some other issues. Not only is it just cost of producing the energy, but it's the cost of what's known as capacity factor. Capacity factor is a component has a rating, say 1 megawatt electric. It'll only, due to other constraints, it may only produce 30% of that 1 megawatt. So like nuclear is the highest. It currently produces 90% capacity factors. You get into our fossil fuels, you're now into the 65–70% capacity factors. And then the renewables tend to be closer to the 30% capacity factors. And that's all reported by the EPA. So that all ties back into cost. Cost, if out of 1 megawatt I'm only producing 30% of that obviously drives back up my cost. Whereas if I'm nameplate at 1 megawatt and I'm producing 90% of that helps drive down my cost. In Germany, they committed to producing 60% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2050. And this was reported on by the Wall Street Journal. Since then, 2010 they made this commitment. 2012, due to Fukushima, they shut down all their nuclear power plants. They have significantly increased to the point I believe they're at about 20% renewable, but their price per kilowatt hour has jumped 60%. It's a huge difference in cost. And the last area we need to talk about is stability. So nuclear power, fossil fuels, those all can be run what they call baseload type plants. Baseload means it runs at 100% of the time without putting power on. It's usually nuclear power. Your fossil fuels tend to be what is known as intermediate power plants. In other words, we bring them up and lower them down based on need. One bad thing about electricity is we don't have a good way of storing it yet. So we have to be able to put as much out on the lines as we're currently using, and we have to be able to ramp that back up and down relatively quickly. And so we have what's known as spinning reserves. And these are power plants that are actually up and running and hot. They're just not putting any power on the lines, or they're putting only a portion of their available power out on the lines. The area where renewables falls down is in this area because most renewables, wind, solar, are considered intermediate. Not intermediate. They're not running all the time. You can't always depend on it, right? You have wind, it fluctuates, cloud comes across, solar goes away. So for every megawatt that the renewable source is putting on the lines, there has to be another megawatt of spinning electricity out there to make up for in case they go away. In the 2014 incident in January, that was one of the problems. When the temperature gets extremely high or it gets really low, wind stops. So we had 12,000 megawatts of wind energy that was currently on the line. When the temperatures drop like that, we lost all that available power. And that had to be made up by natural gas. Natural gas is great because it burns a lot cleaner than coal, but it can come up and ramp down really fast, relatively. But because of the cold, the Northeast and the Midwest were using large amounts of natural gas for heating. Now you have these power plants that are trying to draw a lot of natural gas, and that caused bottlenecks in the distribution of natural gas, which then further drives up the cost of the electricity because now it's harder to get natural gas to the plants, and the plants aren't putting out their rated power. Nuclear power is probably one of the most stable in the fact that we start them up, rerun them at 100% power, and we shut them back down, refuel them, and start them back up. They're not as nice, though, in the fact that you can't ramp them up and down quickly like you can natural gas, or hydroelectric is actually the best. So in the future, as we look at policy guidelines that are being set out, we need to make sure we balance out those three factors: grid stability, cost to the individual, and then environmental impacts. If we look at it from just one point of view, we can say, oh yay, it's good for the environment, but if it's a source that we can't count on all the time, then it's not good for our overall grid. And we don't want to pay too much money for something, so it's got to be a balance in it. So I ask that as we go forward, when this stuff is being put out by the news media, and you're looking at making votes on, that you actually consider the impact of all parts of the power portfolio. Thank you, that's all I have.